So what we're looking at for as wordsmiths, it seems pretty obvious, of course. I mean, line editing and copy editing, it's all about really polishing that prose and that sort of thing. But it's also a lot more. And Jennie Seitz, if you guys didn't go to the mini conference, or even if you did, let me encourage you before, like, so sometime in May, um, go look at her video on for the line editing because she's an editor, of course. She gets paid for this, and she has a wealth of knowledge that she shares in that video. So I've got a link for that, of course. And so check out her video because she gives you a lot of great ideas on what to look for and what copy editors look for. So please go look at that before you start editing. What I'm going to focus on more is kind of like the how and the nuts and bolts of how you complete it, okay? Because she really covers the what really well, okay? Um, yeah, so once again, we're mainly focusing on prose, dialogue, making sure that this is another great place to make sure those transitions, like the beginnings and the ending sentences of your chapters, are working well. You're looking at the beginning sentences or sentence of your novel at this point. You're really drilling that in and trying to find the right fit for that, as well as the one that you're going to end with. Okay. So, yes, we're looking sentence level, and yeah, it's a really fun little thing because I feel like most writers really get into the nitty gritty at this point. Okay. All right. So things that I want you to pay attention to, or to kind of know in advance, you're going to have an initial big editing pass. And then once you do those corrections, once you implement those corrections, you are going to then have several smaller passes, okay, and more drilled in passes, okay? So I want you to, in the last week of May, I want you to really consider what your weaknesses are as a writer. We all have our little writerly ticks, like everybody in my book smirks at each other and smiles. And I have, like, I need a list of synonyms or something. I have to create that. And so that's something that I know that I'm going to look for. I'm going to look for things like making sure my setting is on point and where it's lacking, and all of that kind of. You have to be very real with yourself about where your weaknesses are, and come up with a plan with those, okay, in May, because you're not looking at your manuscript. You just know that these are the things that people usually say, hey, you said this a whole bunch, or you see this phrase repeated a whole bunch in your work. So just make sure that you know that going into it, so you have kind of like a punch list of things to tackle, okay? Also, again, I'm going to harken back to the video about audience. Please make sure you know who your audience, what your purpose and your vibe are. You're going to have to make some calls about the type of language that you use, as far as, difficulty in the language, language like foul language, how much you're going to use, based on your audience and the vibe that you're going for. There's a lot of different things that those two areas touch. And so knowing that ahead of time is really going to help you make calls when you're like, do I go with this or do I go with that? And it's going to make the tiebreaker really easy for you to figure out. Okay. All right. So shall we talk now about the different passes that you're going to make? Okay. Let's dig into that one next. All right, so let's talk about editing passes, okay? That's what I call every time you kind of go through and you edit your book, because for this particular, as a wordsmith, you are going to be doing about 3, or I suggest that you do about 3. Now, again, tailor this how you will. This is just kind of my process that I'm sharing with you in case you don't have one, or you just kind of are kind of geeky like me and like to know about everybody's writing process. All right, so I have three main editing passes that I do whenever I am line editing. Okay. And so my first pass is this initial, um, this bad boy right here. Okay. This is where I go in and I do mark up. Now, if you talk to one of the story weavers, I don't tell them to mark up their text at all. I tell them to use stickies. Don't use stickies. Okay. Just get in there and get dirty with it. Okay. And let your red pen fly. Okay. Or change the color to make it something happier. But in any case, you always want to go in and do this big edit and get this out of the way. So as I kind of mentioned before, some of the things that I look for in that initial pass is I'm thinking about those weaknesses that I mentioned that you need to figure out in the first or the last week of May. And so for me, I know I have to tackle things like character and setting descriptions because in general they're blank slates and I don't tell people what they look like because as a reader I typically just jump right over those and don't even look at them. I actually skip them a lot of times because people get so bogged down with like, this is exactly like the number of freckles on their face. I don't know, that kind of drives me nuts. But I do know that they need some type of description, right? And so that's one of the first things that I'm looking for. I also am really bad about setting the scene at the beginning of chapters. So I immediately go there and make sure that if I have multiple POVs, that the POV is established within the first sentence and that my setting is established in the first or second sentence. That way my readers can orient themselves to where they are in the world that I've created. I also need to go in and look at the dialogue and the monologues because I tend to have a lot of dialogue. And that's just because, for whatever reason, that's what I like the way that how people interact with one another. And so my books tend to be more dialogue heavy instead of, and making sure that they're not running at the mouth like I do all the time. But in any case, I need to break those up, make sure that I have enough description, and character development happening in between those lines of dialogue. Okay. I also have an internal list of crutch words that I use all the time. And so I go through even before I print it out sometimes. It depends on the novel and if I remember to do this. But usually I will print it out with highlighted stuff. Like I said, all my characters smirk or they smile at each other a lot. My copy editor just told me that everybody waves at one another in my book. There's a lot of waving happening. And so I will go in and do a find and replace or search and replace of that word so that it gets highlighted in every instance. And then I can make the decision of, where to do that as I'm going through my initial edit. Okay. I also will look for like inconsistencies with formatting and numbers. Like sometimes I spell out the words and sometimes I don't, and I need to go through and kind of figure that out. Okay. And I usually now have learned that I need to do it according to Chicago style manual. So that's something to consider because that's kind of like the standard for books, which I didn't know before I started doing this copy editing journey with Amanda. So in any case, yes. So that's my checklist, if you will, of things that I'm looking for as I'm going through. And that's in addition to the stuff that Jennie talks about in her video. So please make sure that you go check out her video. I can't tell you how helpful enough it really is. Okay, so that's my initial pass. Now, once I've gotten this bad boy all done and I pat myself on the back, okay, I will go in and that's when I go into my file and I start after I've created a copy and renamed it with the version that it is. So I usually do the title of my book and then line editing, like line editing 1 or something like that, because I go through, like I said, about 3 passes and I want to save each stage so that I'm not screwing it up and then not being able to fix it again. Okay. So, I go in and it's just data entry at that point. You're looking at where you're at and you're fixing the stuff from one place to another. Okay. So that's pretty standard. Now, once I have that done, I give myself a little bit of a rest. And this one is usually like a shorter rest because I'm going to go in and do my second editing pass with Pro Writing Aid. And for this one, I'm not necessarily reading all the way through the novel. So that's why I give myself a shorter space. I think with this last round of editing that I did for Stitchers, I think I gave myself maybe 4 or 5 days, and I celebrated and chilled out and played Zelda. And then I went back in to Pro Writing Aid and I started working on the different reports that they have. Now, I can't tell you enough how much I love this program. This program is stellar. Like, there are other ones that are out there, but this one just takes the cake. Okay. So if you don't have Pro Writing Aid, please do get it. I love it so much. I went ahead and got the lifetime edition, and it'll you can watch my video on kind of walking you through that particular program. But overall, it's just amazing. So there are so many different reports that are available to you. And I highly encourage you to kind of test it out, maybe with a short story. You could do that before, like sometime in May. That way you get used to the program itself. I don't find that it is as helpful as Grammarly. I will be honest. Grammarly for me is, like good for telling me where to put commas and stuff like that. So I do run them in tandem, but I tend to ignore most of Grammarly's suggestions compared to what I do with Pro Writing Aid. And it gives me a much, much cleaner manuscript at the end of the day than if I hadn't. Okay, so some of the stuff that I look for in this particular Pro Writing Aid pass is I look for repetition, and this is across the novel because you can load your entire novel into Pro Writing Aid and look at it across the novel. If you do it by chapter, it's not going to catch some of those things that it would normally have done if you look across the novel. So look for repeated words and phrases, those crutch words that you've missed and you did not know about, and then update your list after you're done so that the next time that you are writing your book and you're editing, you can look for those phrases ahead of time, and you can catch a lot of those even as you're writing. You're like, oh yeah, I need to, vary this a little. Okay. So another big one that I look for is like helping verbs. I didn't realize how many of those suckers that I had. And like to be verbs. So like is and was and were and all those kind of stuff. You want to replace those with the stronger verbs. And holy cow, I can't believe how many of those I had there in my novel. And it's okay because I was a draft, right? So this is just where you're cleaning up your manuscript. So if you see this stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst author in the world. No, don't think that. Just think, hey, look, I'm just cleaning it up. It was just easier to get the thing out. And then you fix the stuff in editing. So you're in the right spot. Don't worry. You're doing okay. All right. The other thing, like I said, there's a lot of great reports in Pro Writing Aid, and I can't tell you how many that I've used. Please go in there and fiddle around and see, and you will find that you have your favorites as well. Like I said, I usually look for repetition and oh gosh, I can't remember all of them. Let me look and see if I can't think of some. I like the summary because it kind of gives me a like an overview of where it's at. The overused words, in addition to the repetition, also things like it helps you with dialogue. So if you're using wonky dialogue tags, it's going to show up and it's going to say, hey, you need to rethink this. Things that I need help with, like I start a lot of my sentences with pronouns. And so like my sentence structure tends to be the same over and over again. So that just gives you an idea of where you're at as far as it goes with, with some of the reports that are really great and some of my favorite ones. It also has another tool that I will use, which is called Rephrase. And if you don't like AI assisted anything, then just be aware that this is AI, but this is more in the sense of it's not rewriting the sentence for you. It's kind of like showing you synonyms that you didn't necessarily think about, or ways to condense your writing a bit more. It is not rewriting the whole thing at all. It's nothing like that. It's just um, having like a thesaurus for you right there at hand. So it's super helpful. Check it out if you like it. If you don't, that's totally cool too. But it is something that I have used because I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes more sense than what I was actually trying to say. That's the word I was really looking for. And I wouldn't have thought about it if it hadn't offered to rephrase that for me. So that is another tool that I use in Pro Writing Aid. Okay. All right. So that's my Pro Writing Aid pass. And this one is, like I said, this pass is not a let's read through from front to back. This is a spot check pass. I guess you could say you're going to be jumping around your novel a lot and just looking at these different types of issues that you're going to see come up. And so I don't technically, I don't think of it as like a hard pass, but it is a lot that you're going to uncover, especially if you're using a robust editing software like Pro Writing Aid. Okay. All right. Now, my last pass is another read through. Okay. Now, this one is because I have this final read through because of all the changes that I have done. Okay. And because I jumped around in Pro Writing Aid, I know I may have had some typos. I may have some, issues, whatever, grammar issues that I just didn't catch. Now, again, because I didn't have like a full read through of the manuscript, I am going to go ahead and give myself like a shorter break of a few days. And then I go in and I do this particular one on, I did mine in, in Word, because I do think that Word is better for editing than not Scribify, I'm saying the wrong thing, than Scrivener. Okay. So I did do mine in Word. You could ideally maybe do it on something like the iPad or something like that. But overall, this is where you're going to want to have your grammar checker on and making sure that you're catching some of those issues that your grammar checker brings to your attention. So I'm not going to tell you to print out a second hard copy. You can if you want, but definitely if that works for you, then go for that. But just know that's kind of what I did. And so I went back through and I read through it. I found some additional phrasing that usually when I do my Pro Writing Aid pass, I find additional phrases that I need to address. And so I'll go ahead and search and replace those phrases with so that it has highlighting. And I will go and I find those. All of that kind of stuff is just one final look, almost like a proofreading look at the novel, so that I'm making sure everything grammatically is in place. Okay. And there's, nothing else that I have missed. Okay. So those are your three main editing passes that I suggest that you do. Again, tailor this to however you want to do it. Okay. This is your rodeo and this is your journey. So make sure that you're making this process work for you. Okay. I'm just, once again, showing you tools and the different ways that I particularly have handled it. So, all right. And give me just a minute and I think I got a little bit more for you. Okay. Okay, so next thing that I want to talk to you about are some kind of do's and don'ts of line or copy editing. All right, so let's start with the don't. Of course, I shouldn't have to say this because I know you guys will not look at your manuscripts and you listen to my thing about giving yourself distance. So I know that you're not going to do this, but please don't look at your manuscript for a good while before you start the Wordsmith journey. Okay, and you don't have to look at structure. You should have already, fixed that. So that shouldn't be something that you're really looking at because it should already be taken care of. So you don't have to worry about that as much. Yeah, so don't worry about that part. All right, what you do want to focus on is really polishing up your work. This is your, I don't know if you guys have ever seen anybody do like carpentry or woodwork or anything like that, but when they're done with their project, they take like a heavy grit sandpaper, and they go after all the rough edges and stuff like that. They knock all that off. Okay, so this is that heavy grit sandpaper that you're doing, is you're going to get all those edges all knocked off and as smooth as you can before you can, in each editing pass after it. So that's you're going to go in with a finer tooth comb, and each thing is going to help you smooth out that surface a lot more. Okay. So another thing you are free to do, of course, is to turn on your grammar checker. Please do that now. If I tell everybody else to turn theirs off because they do not need to look at it at that point, but you guys get to have your grammar checker on, and you can let your grammarian freak flag fly. Okay. You do need to kind of like employ some tricks to find areas that like might need more description or things that need to be cut. And some of those tricks, if you are kind of techie and like me, let me know, and I can talk to you about some macros in Word, which are like little mini programs that help you to find certain things that you would not normally be able to find unless Word highlighted it for you or called it to your attention. And those are wonderful little tricks to use. And a lot of editors use them to help get you as clean of a manuscript as they can. So do employ those. Let me know if you want to know about that, some of those more tricky gadgety kind of things and whatnot, and I'll help you out with those. All right. And you do, of course, before this stage happens, you do want to let beta readers read your work before this stage because, yeah, so make sure you do that as well. You can let them read it after this stage as well to kind of make sure that you've got as good of a canvas as you can have. But at this point, this is when I would suggest hiring, once you've completed all your copy editing and your line editing, this is when I would suggest you, if you're self-pubbing, that you start looking at hiring a professional copy editor to tackle your manuscript. Okay. If you're going into the whole traditionally published route, then this is when you would start looking, creating your pitches, and you're, going to start sending out all that kind of good jazz to your agents, potential agents, and your the publishers you're interested in. Okay. So those are your do's and your don'ts. All right. So do the do's and don't do the don'ts. All right. Now, here are some tips that you can utilize while you're doing your line edits, okay? So first off, they're especially for that final editing pass that we just talked about, make sure that you use the read aloud feature on your computer. It is really super helpful, even though that computer voice is super robotic. If you've misspelled something or you have used the wrong word, it will not mess up and, skip words or say it the right way like your brain does. So like if you have two these, you're usually skipping that word in your brain. And so you don't even see either of those. But a computer will, especially a computer voice, will find that kind of nitpicky stuff for you. So it is a wonderful tool to use. Okay. Like I said, when you are in that first, or golly, I keep trying to say first week of May. When you're in the final week of May, go ahead and start thinking about those weaknesses that you have and make yourself a little checklist. I love checklists because I tend to forget everything if I don't write it down. So make sure you try to make yourself a little checklist if you find those things helpful. Because if you do, then you're less likely to miss something, and you'll get a cleaner manuscript, which means that's less money that you're going to have to spend on an editor. Or that is a cleaner manuscript that your agent's going to fall in love with. Okay. So, just make sure you, you write your stuff down so you don't forget it. All right. Now, a lot of folks use color coding for different problem areas that they have. So they might do an editing, a read through with a highlight for setting and primarily looking at setting. They might do that for just about any like dialogue and making sure that the dialogue is really on point, and they're just focusing in on that. You can do any of those things. So that's another great avenue to try if you've never done so. If you have tried that, like let folks know in the chat, okay, and let everybody know how you do your line edits, okay. Um, I can't say this enough. I love you. I don't love writing in Word, but I love editing in Word because there are so many great features that it has that I don't think that Scrivener even can really come up against. I think Scrivener is great for drafting, but not great for editing. So I do all my editing in Word. But one of the reasons why is because one of many reasons. Macros are a big one. But the advanced search in Word is wonderful because you can tell it to, let's say, for me, I look up the word smirk because I use that a lot. So I would just put smirk in the find, smirk in the replace, and then I would change the setting for the replace and pick a highlight color and tell it to highlight it so that it replaces all the smirks with the highlighted smirk. Okay. And if you already know about those, oh man, it's so helpful to be able to use that. So definitely leverage that to make finding those little writing ticks that you have a lot easier. Okay. Um, and make sure that if you're using something that, let's say you change a character's name, or you are, looking for stuff like changing from third person to first person or first person to third person, you need to make sure those pronouns are good. Um, and don't just search and replace it. Okay. Make sure you search and replace it with highlights so that you make sure that search and replace didn't screw up something that it shouldn't have. Because, yeah, that's just one of those things that you want to make sure you look out for. You don't want to search and like I said, you don't want to search and replace something. And then it happened to me where I think it was okay. The word, like the word, I was replacing O and then K with OKAY, and it took out a space. And so the word before it and the word okay were butted up against each other. And I did not highlight that change because I thought, oh, I know what I'm doing. Of course I don't. So just know that you should highlight it, and it makes finding those mistakes a lot easier, and it allows you to give yourself a little bit of a double check. All right. And this last one is the most important thing that I'm going to tell you. So if nothing else, listen to this, okay? And you need to know when to put your manuscript down, okay? You can stay a wordsmith for a very long time, okay? And don't do that to yourself. Know when to put it down and know when to call somebody in to help you out with it, okay? Because as a self-pubber, you're going to hire somebody to help you find those mistakes, and they're going to help you become a better writer in doing so, okay? And then same thing goes with an agent. You need to know when to put it down because an agent's going to go through there and they're going to help you edit it anyhow, okay? So know when to set it down and know when enough is enough, because if you don't, you're going to damage your manuscript beyond repair. Well, I won't say beyond repair, but you know what I'm getting at. You're going to really do some damage, and then you're going to just give up and walk away and throw your hands in the air. All that kind of bad stuff you don't want to have happen. Just know when to stop, okay? And that's one great thing about us focusing on this in the month of June, is it gives you a time frame to know when to stop doing your line edit, okay? And have that goal of finishing that line edit this month, because I do think that you can finish this in a month. Yeah, this is definitely doable. And if you want to change and have a different goal, that's totally fine. But know when to stop, okay? And trust your gut, and just say it's done. As it's got it, I've done it as good as I can get it. I've got it as good as I can get it. So yeah, trust me, I had that issue, and I just had to say I got to let it go, and that's why I'm hiring an editor. And it was a good choice because it helped me to relax and, you know, yeah, you'll understand when you get there. But in any case, all right, let's talk about goal setting.